we're going to discuss about
how he amassed the power,
how he weakened the bureaucracy,
how he dealt with challengers, how much he stole from the people,
and his exit. So without any further ado,
Let's get
started!
Now we discuss about how Saddam Hussein amassed the power. Saddam Hussein was not born a leader, and he did not gain power through election or public support. Instead, he slowly built his power behind the scene using fear, loyalty, and strict control. First, early political foundation in 1957 until 1968. This video explains how Saddam Hussein gradually amassed power and turned Iraq into a personal dictatorship. Saddam Hussein entered politics in 1957 when he joined the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party. The Ba'ath Party promoted Arab nationalism, socialism, and strong party discipline. From early on, Saddam was not known as an intellectual thinker, but as someone willing to use violence. In 1959, he took part in a failed assassination attempt against Prime Minister Abdul Al-Karim Qasim. Although the mission failed, it increased Saddam's reputation inside the party as a committed revolutionary. Afterward, he fled to Syria and later Egypt, where he built connections with Ba'ath leaders and learned how underground politics worked. This period shaped Saddam's belief that power in Iraq came from force and control, not public persuasion. The 1968 coup and hidden power. In July 1968, the Ba'ath Party took control of Iraq through a military coup. Instead of becoming president, Saddam accepted the role of vice president under Ahmad Hassan al-Bakr. This was a smart strategic move. By staying out of the spotlight, Saddam could build real power without taking public responsibility. He took control of internal security, party organization, and intelligence networks. While others held official titles, Saddam controlled the system from behind the scenes. Those who were loyal were rewarded, while those who opposed him were punished. Fear and money worked together to strengthen Saddam's control. Final consolidation and the 1979 purge. In 1979, Saddam forced President al-Bakr to step down and officially became president of Iraq. His most important action came right after that. During a televised Ba'ath Party meeting, Saddam accused top officials of plotting against the state. One by one, they were arrested, forced to confess, and later executed. This purge ended any form of shared leadership and sent a clear message. Absolute loyalty to Saddam was the only way to survive. From this point forward, Iraq was ruled by Saddam alone, not by institutions. And last, Saddam Hussein built his power through careful planning. He manipulated the party, controlled security force, used oil money to buy loyalty, and ruled through fear. His regime looked strong, but it depended heavily on intimidation rather than stable institutions. When fear disappeared in 2003, his power collapsed as well. Saddam's rise showed how dictators gain power and why systems based on fear do not last.
and now I will explain you how Saddam Hussein weakened the bureaucracy like legislative, judicial, and military of Iraq. When Saddam Hussein seized full power in Iraq in 1979, he did more than just change the government. He systematically dismantled the existing state structure, replacing the functions of the legislative, judicial, and military branches with his personal will. The core of his strategy was absolute centralization through the Ba'ath Party. Saddam ensured that he was the sole source of authority. He held complete control over all key offices like President, Prime Minister, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Force, and Secretary General of the Ba'ath Party. He effectively erased the line between party policy and state policy. The main lawmaking body, the Revolutionary Command Council or RCC, was under his control. This meant Saddam's will was the legitimate law. To prevent the rise of any rivals, he even deliberately built a bureaucracy with overlapping layers of organization. This was a smart design, ensuring no official below him could gather enough information or power to challenge his rule. The second pillar to be dismantled was the judicial system. Under Saddam, the law was no longer about justice, but about repression and coercion. He used an extensive secret police establishment to hunt down all internal opposition. His power was enforced by armed coercion and terror, not by the rational rule of law. The brutal purge in 1979 was the ultimate assertion of this power. Through the television trials, he forced senior of Ba'ath Party members to confess to treasonous plots and then executed them. The message was clear and brutal. In Iraq, personal loyalty to Saddam was the only law, and no bureaucracy opposition offered protection. As a leader who rose through a coup, Saddam was well aware of the threats posed by the military. Therefore, he had to ensure the armed forces were loyal to him personally, not to be the state institution. And then he promoted himself to the rank of general despite having no professional military training, formally placing himself above any military commander. Crucially, he implemented nepotism. Key military and intelligence posts were given to close relatives and clan allies from his hometown. Clan loyalty superseded technical qualification. This clique-based system ensured the military was loyal to him, not the nation. As a counterweight, he bolstered the People's Militia, the armed wing of the Ba'ath Party. This militia served a paramilitary force loyal to the party. This strategy of dividing and conquering the armed force made him immune to internal uprising.
So now we will discuss how and how much they stole from the people. But first, there is one important thing you need to know. Saddam Hussein ran what is called an absolute kleptocracy. In this system, there is no separate between the state budget and Saddam's personal family wealth. Iraq's national wealth, especially from the oil, should have belonged to the people. Instead, it was taken for three main goals. First, to building presidential palaces. Second, to building loyalty from tribes and military officers. And third, to building illegal weapons on the black market. So now, it's time to discuss in detail. First, let's start with their biggest source of income. It is manipulating the UN Oil for Food program. This was the biggest corruption scheme in the history of Saddam's regime. The UN allowed Iraq to sell oil to buy food and medicine, but Saddam cheated the system. Here's the mechanism. First, surcharges or illegal fees. Saddam sold oil below market price to specific buyers. However, these buyers have to pay an extra fee. Is 10 to 15 cents per barrel directly into secret foreign accounts, not the official UN account. And the second is kickbacks. When Iraq bought food or medicine from foreign suppliers, officials asked the suppliers to raise the price by 10%. The supplier then returned this extra money to Saddam's officials as fake service fees or transportation costs. According to the US Senate and Volcker Committee, Saddam stole between $10 billion and $12.8 billion from 1990 to 2003 through these schemes. When the first method was a complex scheme, the second method was direct theft. This is known as the central bank robbery. On March 18, 2003, which is one day before the US invasion, Qusay Hussein, who is Saddam's second son, went to the central bank in Baghdad at 4 a.m. He carried a handwritten note from Saddam. The note ordered the bank governor to hand over the country's cash reserves to keep them safe from enemies. Without proper paperwork, bank staff were forced to load stocks of $100 bills into 3 large trucks. The process took hours because the amount of money was so huge. They sold about $1,920 million to $1 billion in cash. This is considered the largest bank robbery in the world history. US troops later found much of this money hidden behind false walls in Saddam's palaces, but hundreds of millions are still missing. Besides manipulating UN, they also had another way to get cash. This brings us to the point number 3, oil smuggling by land. Saddam secretly smuggled oil to get hard currency that could not be traded. Here's the mechanism. Saddam signed trade deals or called protocols with Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and Egypt. Oil was sent using thousands of tanker trucks every day by land and small boats in the Persian Gulf. These neighbors paid for the oil at a discount. Their payment went directly to Saddam's controlled accounts, completely bypassing the Iraq government budget. A report by the US General Accounting Office, or GAO, estimates that between 1997 and 2001 alone, Iraq made $5.7 billion from this illegal smuggling. This money went entirely into Saddam's personal pocket and his inner circle to fund security forces, not to help the people. So you might ask, where did all this money go? The answer is point number 4, a lavish lifestyle amidst starvation. The stolen money was used to build luxury properties that didn't help the public at all. First is presidential palaces. During the sanctions, which is 1991 to 2003, while Iraqi people suffered from a lack of food and medicine, Saddam built or renovated 80 to 100 presidential palaces. The cost was about $2 billion. These palaces had rare Italian marble, gold facades, and artificial lakes. Meanwhile, the clean water system for the common people was destroyed. And the second is family business monopoly. Saddam's eldest son, Uday Hussein, controlled the Olympic Committee and Football Association. The second is family business monopoly. Saddam's eldest son, Uday Hussein, controlled the Olympic Committee and Football Association. He used this position to import luxury goods such as cars, cigarettes, alcohol without paying taxes. He forced successful businessmen to give him company shares or pay protection money. If they refused, they were jailed or killed and their wealth was taken by the family. While Iraqis were starving, Uday owned over 1,000 luxury cars including Rolls Royces and Ferraris. He also had a private zoo with lions and tigers that were fed the highest quality meat.
In this video, I will explain how Saddam Hussein maintained his power and dealt with political opponents. He was known as one of the most ruthless leaders in modern history, using fear, violence, and street counter to silence anyone who threatened his authority. To begin with, Saddam Hussein used public fear as a powerful weapon to control his own party and government. One of the most frightening events happened in 1979, just days after Saddam officially became president. He gathered hundreds of high-ranking Ba'ath Party officials in a large hall. In front of cameras, a party member who had been tortured was forced to confess to a conspiracy supported by Syria. Saddam then wrote off the names of those labeled as traitors, and they were immediately dragged out of the room and executed. As a psychological strategy, the remaining party members were forced to join the firing squads and kill their own colleagues. This was done to prove loyalty and to make them involved in the crime. In addition to public executions, Saddam also built a strict and complex intelligence system known as the Intelligence State or Mubarak. Several intelligence agencies monitored both the public and each other. These include Jihaz al-Mubarak al-Amma, which handled general intelligence, and Al-Am al-Has, which was responsible for protecting the president and his family. Citizens were encouraged to spy on one another, even within their own families. Even small criticism of Saddam could cause someone to disappear mysteriously. Not only political opponents, but entire ethnic and religious groups also become targets of Saddam's repression. Saddam deeply distrusts the Shia population in the south and the Kurds in the north, seeing them as potential rebels. During the Al-Anfal campaign in 1988, military operations was carried out against the Kurds, including the use of chemical weapons in Halabja, which killed thousands of civilians. After the Gulf War in 1991, Shia and Kurdish groups rose up against the government. Saddam responded with extreme violence, including draining the southern marshlands where the Mars Arabs lived to destroy rebel hiding places. To secure his position, Saddam relied heavily on family ties and tribal loyalty. He placed family members and people from Tikrit clan in important military and security positions. Those who remained loyal were rewarded with wealth and privilege. However, Saddam did not hesitate to kill his own relatives if they were considered disloyal. A well-known example is the execution of his two sons-in-law, Hussein Kamel and Saddam Kamel, who defected to Jordan, were persuaded to return, and were then killed. Another important method Saddam used was creating a strong cult of personality. He presented himself as a national hero and the protector of Iraq. His states and portraits were displayed on almost every street and in government buildings. This created the feeling that he was always present and watching, which discouraged people from opposing him.
So now I'm going to tell you about his accent. Saddam Hussein ruled Iraq for 24 years through a brutal mix of fear, tribal loyalty, and ruthless security forces. His exit from power, however, was a dramatic and multi-stage process. A rapid military collapse, a humiliating capture, a controversial trial, and an execution. This is the true story of how it happened. First, his downfall. The final chapter began with the US-led invasion of Iraq on March 20, 2003, under the stated rationale of disarming Iraq of weapons of mass destruction and enforcing UN resolution. No active WMD program was found after the invasion, a conclusion confirmed by the Iraq Survey Group in 2004. Saddam's military weakened by sanction, no-fly zones, and poor morale collapsed in 3 weeks. Key cities fell with minimal resistance. On April 9, 2003, Baghdad was fell to US forces. Iraqis, assisted by US Marine, toppled Saddam's state in Firdos Square, an iconic moment that was broadcast worldwide. Saddam fled the capital, and his Ba'athist government dissolved. Second, his capture. For 8 months, Saddam was a fugitive in his own country. He moved between safe houses, rural farms, and tribal shelters around his hometown of Tikrit, relying on tribal loyalists and also increasingly isolated. The end came on December 13, 2003. Through intelligence gleaned from Chapter 8, US forces launched Operation Red Dawn. They found Saddam not in a palace, but in a tiny shallow dirt hideout known as a spider hole. He was armed with a Glock pistol but surrendered without resistance, and he brought $7,500 cash. His disheveled appearance, long beard, red clothes, and exhausted mentally was photographed and televised globally. The image sent shockwaves to the worldwide. The fierce strong man now became a man in a hole. The third, his trial. Saddam was handed over to the Iraqi interim government in June 2004. His trial began on October 19, 2005, before the Iraqi Special Tribunal established by the Coalition Provisional Authority. The first case focused on the Dujal massacre of 1982, where 148 Shia men were executed following an assassination attempt against Saddam. This case was chosen for its clear evidence and living witnesses. During the trial, 3 defense lawyers were assassinated and the chief judge was replaced twice. Saddam repeatedly challenged the court's legitimacy, claiming he was still Iraq's president. And on November 5, 2006, he was found guilty of crimes against humanity and sentenced to death by hanging. And last, his execution. Saddam's appeal was rejected. He was executed before sunrise on December 30, 2006, at the Iraq's intelligence headquarters in Camp Justice Baghdad during Eid al-Adha, a move criticized by Sunni leaders as a provocative. At the gallows, he refused a blindfold, recited prayers, and met his end with defiant calm. But the story didn't end here. A leaked cell phone video from the execution chamber showed guards taunting him with the Shia slogans. The footage sparked global debate about Finnegan's versus justice, dignity, and the new Iraq's path. Then, his body was returned to his family and buried in Al-Abja near Tikrit. The grave was destroyed in 2015 by ISIS militants. Saddam Hussein's exit created a seismic shift. For Iraq, it meant a devastating power vacuum. The collapse of state institutions unleashed brutal sectarian violence, a bloody insurgency, and eventually created the condition for the rise of ISIS. For the world, it led to a long, costly occupation and an enduring debate over the wisdom and morality of regime change. Saddam's exit was rapid militarily, messy legally, and symbolic politically. His regime fell because it relied on fear and personal control, not institutional resilience. So, it disintegrated overnight when removed by overwhelming force. But his death was not in the end of the story. It was the beginning of a long, turbulent, and painful new chapter whose consequences are still being felt today. His fall solved the problem of his tyranny, but it didn't solve the problem of Iran.
So that's all our explanation about the dictatorship of Saddam Hussein. We hope this video will give you some insight.
Thank you for watching and see you next semester.
Bye!